Bienvenidos al Instituto de Oncología y Radioterapia de la Clínica Ricardo Palma.
Ahora tenemos una solución que se llama OncoDeep, que es una caracterización molecular de biopsia sólida, OncoStratengo, que se enfoca sobre un análisis en biopsia sólida y en biopsia líquida, que es una combinación. Y nosotros sabemos también que la biopsia líquida es muy bien de moda por el momento, por eso tenemos el OncoSelect, que permite también hacer secuenciación sobre paneles reducidos para 4 tipos de cáncer: cáncer de mama, HR positivo, HER2 positivo, colon y pulmón. Y para monitoreo tenemos el OncoTrace, que permite seguir la evolución de la enfermedad. Acá son detalles más científicos, le pasaremos también la presentación, pero por ejemplo en OncoDeep, si voy un poquito más en detalle, analizamos un bloque de parafina con 75 genes y tenemos también incluido todos los biomarcadores de inmunoterapia, que son 5: el PD-L1, CD8, el MSI, la inestabilidad microsatélite, el tumor burden y también mutaciones que son asociadas a una sensibilidad o resistencia a inmunoterapia. Y también siempre lo combinamos, no hacemos solo el NGS, sino también que agregamos análisis, hasta 10 análisis de biomarcadores proteicos, las inmunohistoquímicas. Y nos permite dar al médico oncólogo un informe completo con recomendaciones de tratamiento con las drogas que tienen un beneficio clínico mayor y un riesgo de toxicidad mayor. Si vemos más en detalle el OncoStratengo, el panel es un poquito más amplio, analizamos más de 150 genes. También la idea es añadir siempre las inmunohistoquímicas y analizamos al mismo tiempo, en paralelo, una biopsia líquida que va a analizar 40 genes para también poder descifrar la heterogeneidad tumoral. Con el OncoSelect, como le había mencionado, los paneles son entre 7 y 14 genes para estos tipos de cáncer, pulmón, colon y mama. Y el OncoTrace es un sistema de monitoreo. Ahora le voy a presentar a mi colega, el doctor Jean-François Laes, que es el experto, es nuestro CPO, ha estudiado en la Universidad Libre de Bruselas, es biólogo molecular y ahora le va a dar una presentación más científica de la capacidad.
Buenos días a todos y disculpe porque voy a hablar en inglés porque mi español es peor que mi inglés. So, I will talk about how important is the molecular profiling in the modern oncology. So, as you know, before everybody talked about personalized medicine, which is one marker associated with one treatment like HER2, EGFR. And now we are moving to what people call precision medicine, where you have to take into account the whole evolution of the disease, starting from the diagnostics, the molecular profiling, as well as the monitoring of the evolution of the patient through some molecular testing. So as you know better than me, that before it was chemotherapy for everybody, and in the years 2000 came the idea of the discovery of some biomarkers, and the pharmaceutical companies developed treatment against those biomarkers. But the question is that not everybody has those biomarkers, so how to deal with those patients? And for the patient that has those biomarkers, some of them doesn't respond, and the other one relapse quite faster. So as you can see here, actually what happened in most of the metastatic patients is that you identify a biomarker, you treat it through the correct treatment, and what happened is that the patient is relapsing, you have less option, and the patient is relapsing unfortunately faster and faster. Meaning that as a first sight, simple biomarker seems pretty useful, and they are, but at the other way around, actually it's not sufficient to cure the patient. So the idea here is why those people are relapsing. And actually, through the new discoveries and thanks to the technology, we are able now to identify more and more mutations that are associated with those resistances. And thanks to the NGS, because the problem is that biopsies are becoming smaller and smaller, and on the other hand, you have to analyze more and more markers. So how to do this? And NGS solve the solution because you can analyze a lot of biomarkers from a very small biopsies. So the idea will be the following, is that you perform what we call a molecular passport, where you analyze the most useful biomarker as you can, then you treat the patient, and then we found a way to monitor the evolution of the disease through non-invasive procedure with adapted biomarkers. But we are facing two huge problems. The first one is the heterogeneity of the tumor itself, because it contains several populations, and when you take one biopsy, actually you just have a partial view of what happened within these biopsies, and you have different populations containing different mutations, and when you perform the analysis on one biopsy, you just sequence only one part of those populations. The other problems is that in metastatic disease, actually, every metastasis is evolving by its own, meaning that they will acquire a new mutation from time to time, and even if you find a mutation in the primary biopsies, it doesn't mean that the other metastases will contain the same mutation. So how to solve those problems? And one possibility, which is coming very fast, is the liquid biopsy. So what do you have in the blood? You have normal cells. You have circulating tumor cells, which are very useful to understand why some tumor will go to metastasis and other not. You have exosomes, which is really interesting if you want to analyze RNA, for instance, because exosomes is related to a mechanism used by the tumor cell to discuss with the microenvironment in order to survive. And you have the DNA. So you have free DNA, which are coming from the mama cell, and you have DNA coming from the tumor cells. And we will focus on this material. So what do we have? We have normal DNA, and we have tumor DNA, and within this tumor DNA, we want to be able to pick up some very important mutations. And what are those characteristics of this circulating free tumor DNA? It's coming from the tumor cell, so it's quite specific. It's associated with apoptosis and necrosis, so the death of the tumor cells. They are small, which has some issues regarding the technologies. And what is interesting is the half-life of this DNA is very short, meaning that you are not facing issues, for instance, that you have something very stable, which remains in the blood, and it's a sign of something that happened a few months ago. It's really an in-life way to monitor the evolution of the disease. And what is really important is that you can analyze and identify a lot of different mutations, like point mutation, insertion deletion. You can analyze copy number, translocation, methylation, meaning that with this material, actually you can have a look at a lot of different biomarkers that might be useful for you, for the patient. However, we are also facing some hurdles. Is that the quantity of this circulating free DNA is highly dependent on the tumor type, the localization, and the vascularization of the tumor. So for instance, of course, the more advanced you are, the more ctDNA you will have in the blood, because not only the primary tumor, but all the metastases will shed some ctDNA. Also, different tumor types release different quantity of ctDNA. For instance, a colorectal cancer will release more ctDNA than a glioblastoma, so you have to take this into account. In addition, you look at mutation, and we know that the different tumor types contain different average number of mutations. So you see, we have to take into account the stage, the tumor type, as well as per tumor type, the number of mutations associated with this tumor type, and the localization. Because we know that, for instance, that the metastasis located in associated with bones will release more ctDNA than the one associated with the lung. And last but not least, you are looking at DNA within DNA, meaning that you are not looking at the needle in a haystack, you are looking at the needle in a needle stack. Because you have a lot of normal DNA and very few molecules of the DNA coming from the tumor that contain your mutation. So you have to be highly specific and highly sensitive. So the next question is what to choose between solid biopsy and liquid biopsy. If you look at the strength of the solid biopsy, you can make pathology, you can analyze the expression of the protein and the activation of those proteins, you can make a very more comprehensive molecular profiling of the solid biopsy. The weaknesses is that it's invasive, it costs money because the patient has to come to the hospital. Also, you are facing the degradation and false positive mutation because of the way the samples are prepared when they are embedded and treated by formalin, which induce some mutations which are related to chemical alteration. And it's less representative of the heterogeneity of the disease because you just analyze a small piece of the tumor. And imagine if you want to monitor the evolution of the disease, we can't take a biopsy every 3 months for the patient. This is too invasive. On the other way around, liquid biopsy is cheaper, fast, non-invasive. You have a better overview of the heterogeneity. But you can make molecular pathology, you can analyze the expression of the protein for the moment. And if you are thinking about for the monitoring, it will be far easier to take a blood sample at a patient than to take a biopsy, of course. This is the theory. What about experiment? So here we analyze different tumor type at different stage, and we perform the sequencing on the solid biopsy and the liquid biopsy using the same genes to see what is the heterogeneity. And we increase this number, but the results are always the same. We observe 13% of the case where actually we have a discrepancy, meaning that it's about 7% of the case we do have a mutation in the solid biopsy, which is not present in the liquid, and vice versa. In addition, what we observe is that the more time you have between the solid biopsy and the liquid biopsy, the more different will be the results, of course. And this is an issue because often you took a biopsy at a patient, and then the patient is treated and then relapse, and you want to perform molecular analysis on the biopsy to understand why. The point is that if the biopsy is too old, actually the result you will have will not be fully representative of the current situation, because the tumor just evolved. And you see here how important, so this is real patient and real cases. You see how important it might be, because for one patient, colorectal cancer, we identify that no mutation KRAS in the solid biopsy, but in the blood we found a KRAS mutation. So the patient was supposed to be treated with cetuximab, but with this result, what will be the treatment? And we're facing a lot of those cases in metastatic patients. So we found some mutation in the blood that are not present in the solid biopsy. You might say, okay, it is just 13%, but 13%, it's already a lot. And now, as you know, people are using immunotherapy to treat the patient. So how to deal with this complexity and immunotherapies? Because for immunotherapies, as explained by Fiona, we are using 5 different biomarkers to predict what will be the response to immunotherapies. And you clearly see that here we need the solid biopsy because we have to look at PD-L1 expression, we have to look at CD8, which is a good prognosis, lymphocytes. We also look at MSI, microsatellite instability, and for the moment the technology is not sensitive enough to look at blood, so you have to look at the solid biopsies. And we also look at the tumor mutational burden, which might be looked in the solid biopsy and the liquid. But if you want to look at this in the liquid biopsy, it costs for the moment a lot of money. But you see here, because what we call immunotherapy for the moment, it is targeted therapies, because you target PD-1 or PD-L1. So now we have, unfortunately, patients that relapse, and we started to understand why they relapse. They relapse because, like the other targeted therapies, it occurs mutation that associated with resistance. And how to track those resistance? Same problem than before, you cannot make biopsies. So liquid biopsy is, for the moment, the best way to monitor the evolution of the disease. So this is how we show the results. It's a radar representation. And you might see that, of course, the more you are at the edge or at the summit of the radars, the best prediction you will have for the patient. Sometimes one predictor might be enough. If you are thinking about MSI, it's a very strong predictor. So if you are MSI positive, the data show that you have 75% to answer. Or the other way around, if you have PD-L1 positive, you know that you're close to 40–50%. But you know that if you have PD-L1 negative for some tumor, you have nevertheless 10% of the patient that will answer the treatment. So you can clearly see that one biomarker is not accurate enough to predict what will be the response. So the idea is to combine the most useful biomarker to decipher this heterogeneity. And this is our platform, so if you want to browse, we have some case studies. So, muchas gracias.
Voy a presentar el caso, ¿no? Sí, puedo. ¿En la web? Sí. ¿Tiene acceso a internet?
Sí.
Sí, tiene acceso a internet. ¿Puedes mostrarte? Es que como lo hice en el computador de...
Spanish keyboard. So. So here I will show you, we do have some case studies. I will show one which is really representative of what I just talked about. Here, just to show you the way where we show the data. So the idea is to use different widgets to show the data where we perform, when we receive the sample, we perform pathology QC. Sorry. We perform also next generation sequencing and different analysis. But the time is not works. Okay. That's coming. Okay. No problem. Okay, so this is a very interesting case because it's a non-small cell lung cancer, and actually the patient had this cancer in 2015, and the people took a first biopsy, and it was EGFR negative. So it was treated by chemotherapies, and the patient didn't answer very well. So we received another biopsy, and we performed sequencing. And actually, we found those two activating mutations, which are those two. So with this, the physician decided to treat the patient with afatinib. And in order to monitor the evolution of the disease, we took several blood samples, and we analyzed in parallel, of course, the presence or absence of those activating mutation, as well as the potential mutation which is known to be associated with resistance to EGFR TKI. And what we observed is that the patient went well, and suddenly we observed only, so those mutations were still at 0, and we observed this mutation at 1%. And the PET scan was negative. So the question is, do I change the treatment of my patient, or do I continue to treat the patient with afatinib? Because we know that if we change too fast the treatment, we will make the tumor more aggressive. And this has been shown, especially for liquid tumor, where in early 2000 they change the treatment too fast according to those kind of signal. So what happened is the physician decided not to change the treatment. But we decided to monitor closer the patient because there is a risk of relapse, actually. And suddenly, what we observed a few months after, it's the increase, but of the 3 mutations. So, and it was confirmed by imaging. Indeed, the patient is relapsing, and we knew it before the physician. And you might say, okay, the next logic step would have been to treat the patient with osimertinib. But osimertinib was not approved in patient's country. And the physician received by pharmaceutical company pembrolizumab, which is not the best choice, but just to try. And the patient was treated with pembro, and he answered pembro. But here, it's not shown here, but in early September, we found again the apparition of those 3 mutations. And indeed, the patient is relapsing. And what is nice is that now osimertinib is approved in patient's country. So the patient is now treated by osimertinib, and we made a blood sample in end of October, and once again, no markers present in the blood. So you see here, first the analysis of a solid biopsy, and then the use of the liquid biopsy. We can monitor, and according to the results, of course, it's not working for all the patients 100% of the time, but for some patients and some diseases, we are able to identify the evolution of those mutations in the blood, and able to identify resistance mutation in the blood that might be treated by other treatments. Si tienes preguntas, puedes hablar en español.
Buenos días. En un inicio presentamos 4 tipos de plataformas moleculares. ¿Cuáles fueron específicamente utilizadas en este caso? Al inicio y en el seguimiento.
We use Oncolib for this patient.
Initial diagnosis.
Yes, and then we monitor through OncoTrace. So within the 4 products, what we use to what we advise is we advise Oncolip for stage 3 and 4. For some cancer, we do advise to use Stratengo, because for breast, colon, lung, cup, non-primary, and prostate, for metastatic patient, we know that it might exist primary resistance or secondary resistance. So in that sense, it's a good strategy. Of course, it's more expensive, but it's a good strategy to look at the solid biopsy and the liquid biopsy in the same time. For OncoSelect, we just focus on few cancer, colon, breast, and lung. And it is advised to use this when either there is solid biopsy, which is especially the case for lung, or you see that the patient is relapsing and you don't want to use a new biopsy, and the patient already contains some interesting mutations. For OncoTrace, this is a personalized monitoring. So what we do, we sequence the solid biopsy of the patient with a huge number of genes, and we pick up 10 to 15 mutations that are specific from the tumor. Because with liquid biopsy, there is an issue. It's when it's negative. You might ask, it's negative because the tumor is not there anymore, or it might be negative because the tumor is not shedding enough ctDNA in the blood. So if you just look at a bundle of genes, which are always the same, you might miss the fact that the tumor is coming back. We decided to use a personalized strategy because we know that by looking at those markers that are coming from the tumor, just by statistics, we have more probability to avoid false negative results.
Otra pregunta. Si bien durante la evolución y seguimiento de la enfermedad contamos con herramientas tales como es el OncoTrace, ¿cuál es el tiempo recomendado para solicitar esta prueba? ¿Cada mes, cada 2 meses, cada 3 meses? Porque eso significa también...
Sí, it's a good question. So for the moment, we are very careful because it will depend of the tumor type, the evolution of the patient. So for the moment, we are pretty conservative. So we said, if you have a doubt, just order OncoTrace or blood sample 3 weeks before the scheduled visit of the patient, because then you will have the report. And of course, according to the report and the other information that you have, you might say, I think this patient probably answered the treatment and I will schedule a visit within 6 months, and then you might ask for a blood sample in 6 months, or you might say, I think this patient is relapsing, so I will be more careful and I will order a blood sample in 3 months. So for the moment, our motto is we stick to your routine, because we just have a partial information. You have the global information for the patient, so you know better the patient than us.
¿Se ha probado estos paneles en otros tumores como, por ejemplo, tumores metastásicos cuyo origen no es conocido fácilmente?
¿Cuál de tumor?
Cáncer de unknown origin.
CRP, yes. For CRP we have a special product, because what we do is that first of all we perform different immunohistochemistries to reduce the different possibilities of the origin, and in the meantime we sequence. And we also use different analyses. So by this combination, but we need a solid biopsy in that case, we reduce the possibility, and then we can provide you with some insight of the origin of the tumor as well as some potential treatment for the patient. But if you just look at liquid biopsy, it's difficult, because imagine that the tumor, if it's a colorectal or a pancreas, actually if you found a KRAS mutation in the blood, the way to treat the patient will be far, far different. And you will say, oh yeah, I have a KRAS.
Menciona que una de las desventajas es el tiempo. ¿De cuánto hablamos? Se toma una muestra ¿En cuánto tiempo tenemos un resultado?
So as soon as we have it passed the quality control in your laboratories, it's between 7 to 10 working days, and I think it takes 4 days, 2 to 4 days to come to Belgium. So let's say 2 to 3 weeks. That's why I mentioned 3 weeks before the visit, and you are on the same side of the world.
¿Cuál es el nivel de correlación entre la biopsia líquida, la secuenciación en biopsia líquida y la secuenciación del tumor? El nivel de concordancia.
Concordancia es 87%.
87%.
¿Quieres presentar el caso de mama?
Ah, sí, sí. So here it's another case. So it's a breast cancer, HR positive, and in 2015, actually the patient was supposed to go to palliative treatment because she was on the bed and she can't move anymore and she didn't answer none of the treatments. And we decided, the physician decided to make an oncology. And what we observed a mutation in the solid biopsy. We observe this mutation, which is not really associated with any resistance as such. And we observe also a strong amplification of the CDK4. So the physician decided to treat, based on this result, to treat the patient with exemestane and palbociclib. Okay? And the patient didn't answer. So we decided to make an oncotrace, just to look within the blood what is going on. And we identified this mutation. And this mutation is associated with resistance to exemestane, as well as tamoxifen, but not to fulvestrant. And at that time, fulvestrant was also FDA approved in combination with palbociclib. So the physician decided to treat the patient with fulvestrant plus palbociclib. And the patient was in stable disease. And actually she was able again to work, to have a quite good quality of life. But still we observed this mutation present in the blood, meaning that the tumor was still there. Okay, it reduced a bit, the patient was in stable disease, thanks to the fulvestrant, nevertheless the mutation was still there. And unfortunately she died. But at least she had almost a year with a quite good quality of life compared to palliative treatment. So as I mentioned, for some patients it might work depending on cancer type and depending on the patient, of course. But as you know better than me, it's not 100% of the time, unfortunately. And we do have different case reports like colorectal cancer and other cancer type. For some cancer, it's more difficult. You are thinking about pancreas, for instance, or glioblastoma, or other cancer with a worse prognosis. Actually, for some of them, they are not yet good targeted therapies for those cancer types. Immunotherapy is a game changer. So I'm sure that we will see, with pancreas, MSI, with prostate, also immunotherapy, triple negative breast cancer. Nevertheless, the problem will be the same, because you will have patient answering, patient not answering, and patient answering and then relapsing. So the philosophy and the way to decipher this complexity will be the same, whatever the therapy is. I don't know if you have some other questions.
¿Tiene más experiencia, digamos, del grupo con nosotros trabajando estos días en el doctor Carabeo? ¿Tú qué piensas sobre esto, Pepe?
Me parece muy interesante esto. Nosotros no estamos haciendo solamente muestras de médula ósea, que es una suerte de biopsia líquida también, pero no hacemos ese seguimiento, solamente hacemos el diagnóstico en un punto y por ahí solamente el examen medular crónica hacemos un estudio de la cantidad de cómo va mejorando el BCR-ABL, pero no de este tipo. No tenemos una monitorización del ADN que va circulando, ¿no? Que es una cosa novedosa que está ya difundida por bastantes partes del mundo, ¿no?
Sí. ¿Cuál es el nivel de aprobación que tienen para FDA y para EMA?
For the moment, in liquid biopsy, the only approval is the EGFR 790M, which is, so the FDA said that you have to first analyze in the blood. If it's positive in the blood, give osimertinib. If it's negative in the blood, then they said go back and ask for solid biopsy. From our side, we are working in ISO accredited lab, meaning that everything is ISO, and we follow the guidelines through the FDA. So for instance, for PD-L1, if it's pembro, we are using the antibody provided by GACO. So we follow those guidelines.
Bueno, queremos agradecer la presencia del doctor Jean-François Laes. Queremos hacer un reconocimiento con un certificado de presentación. Muchas gracias. Agradecemos su presencia. De igual modo, agradecer a la doctora Fiona Demol por su participación y presentación con las nuevas herramientas que podemos ofrecer a nuestros pacientes. Gracias. Para esta mañana agradecemos también a los doctores que nos han podido acompañar en esta actividad. Concluida la presentación. Muchas gracias, Sonia.